Soulful Sauna, Stories of Self-Mastery. Thank you for joining us. It is you, the viewer, that makes this podcast. Your host, Juliette Noske, and her guests are here to share stories of self-mastery, to inspire you and ignite the power of positive change on your own journey. Thank you for being with us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soulful Sauna podcast. Today, we have a special guest, and his name is James Broadley. He grew up outside of Portsmouth as one of four brothers, where his love for the outdoors began. After graduating from drama school in 2018, James joined Amnesty International UK, working in fundraising and communications. While there, he started volunteering at a South London charity called and launched Make a Film in a Weekend. He is passionate about using storytelling for social impact. James continues to create meaningful projects that bring people together. And James and I met at a retreat called the Regenerative Retreat a while back. And it was a pleasure to meet you and looking forward to our conversation today, James. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Great to be here, Juliette.
Let me start with what you're currently working on at the moment. Where are your attentions focused at the moment?
Cool. Great. So my attentions are focused on three main tasks currently with Make a Film in a Weekend. So our upcoming event is called the Story Gathering. And in short, the Story Gathering is a live participatory event exploring how a story can be a tool to help people feeling lonely and also inspire climate resiliency into grassroots level community engagement. And the next event we've got coming up is on the 24th of November in Bristol. And I'm currently just doing all the necessary errands to make that possible. So talking with caterers and storytellers and musicians to make that go. The second task activity is organising a film screening in London. So we've just finished making a movie about loneliness and community spirit in Pimlico, which is a really interesting part of Westminster Borough. And we designed a film over 3 days with elderly residents, exploring what isolation meant to them. And from that, we've got a short 8-minute movie. And on the 26th of November this month, we're coming together again with all the different contributors. So there's about 25 different people in the movie. And we're bringing them all together to enjoy a meal and also reopen what those themes mean to them. But now with more people from the community. So we're looking to kind of target different faith groups. And there's the Bangladeshi community, there's the Muslim community in certain areas of the borough that we want to speak to more to. So all bringing them back together again to celebrate storytelling. And then the third aspect of the work is thinking ahead to 2025. We want to run 4 more story gatherings across England. So we're going to be running projects in Hackney, Southampton, Bradford and Bristol. So I'm applying for the Arts Council England Fund to make that possible. And yeah, currently doing that. So that's Mondays and Tuesdays. And on Wednesdays and Thursdays, I work with the Birch Collective CIC, doing marketing and comms with them. So we work with young people aged 16 to 25 in Bristol who are experiencing some kind of mental health challenge. And we do outdoor nature activities like carpentry, horticulture and heritage craft. And we've got an allotment that people can drop into. And so I come and do some allotment time there sometimes, but most of my time is spent doing outreach and making sure more and more people know about this service.
Wow, from what you've shared there's so many questions that I have that I'd love to, reach into there.
Well, we're in the sauna now, so let's see what comes out.
Yeah, I watched I think it was like a promotional video of the story gathering, and it was so heartwarming to hear all the different people's experiences, and I'll share that link with the podcast as well so people can check it out. And it really spoke to me as well, because I know how important stories are in my own life, as well as, you know, my work. I was a drama teacher for many years, and how stories bring us together. How did you get into storytelling initially? What pulled you into storytelling?
Growing up, I have three brothers, and a lot of our time was spent in an imaginative world, outdoors, playing games. And when we weren't doing that, we were, well, doing other things. But a lot of it was also indoors, making films and playing kind of indoor make-believe worlds. And I think that joy of just being somebody else or like playing a game with other people, I think it's just really stuck with me. And then when I got to secondary school, I started doing plays and theatre, and I did GCSE and A-level theatre. And I think that sense of play was still there, but I think it became a bit more serious. So I sort of, inhabit a character and be very serious when you do that. And but I was still really, yeah, I just felt very inspired and alive when delivering a character. I think the quality of listening when you're on stage with somebody and you're really tuning into the audience is a very magical experience. And I think that buzz kind of inspired me to go to drama school, and to explore that more. So yeah. And I think my parents as well, I think my mum and dad always read stories with us growing up. And I remember just how enchanting their storytelling was. So I think that played a big part in it as well.
Mm. Do you think that storytelling supported you in your own, like, personal growth and your own journey of self-mastery? And if so, how?
The first book I ever read was Jonny Wilkinson's autobiography, and I think I must have been 12. I don't know if I read it all. I think I did read it all because I've got this impression that it was a very I was very impressed with myself for finishing it. Um uh and I think having a role model like him growing up really was a big thing. I played a lot of rugby, and then even at school, I think his kind of Wilkinson sort of, you know, really work smart and be really his like 10,000 hour attitude to life, really putting in time and seeing the results build up over time. Um, so I think, yeah, just isolating that one story as an example, I think really has definitely shaped me. Yeah, I think at a larger sense, perhaps like the Christian story of of faith and community and salvation through like having a connection with God. I think that has been huge in my life, that story, up until the age of around 17, where I stopped believing. But up until then, it was a huge story of knowing that I have this connection with the spirit, and that's really really shaped. Even though I don't believe, I think it still shapes me to this day.
Mm, yeah. Do you did your belief go somewhere else?
In a way, it did. I think so. I'm 28 now, and I think I sort of stopped being a Christian when I was 17, and I sort of needed to shake that story off me. I kind of had to like let go of it to find something else. And I think for a long time, I didn't have a faith or a spiritual kind of identity, but I had a memory of a feeling that church gave me, and the feeling was of really profound compassion and like the feeling of like connection, and it's a visceral feeling in the body. um and I suppose that's a real thing. It doesn't matter what story you're reading, what scripture you're getting it from, that feeling in the body was very real for me. So I think since then I've kind of remembered that and explored ways of experiencing that again. And when I was 21, I went and did a Vipassana meditation 10-day sit up in Stowmarket, north of London. And yeah, I think that was extraordinary. That feeling of peace and connection with my own body. And I think from there, I was like, okay, it is possible to connect again with that feeling, but this time on terms that I can understand and on terms that I don't need to believe in anything in order to experience that peace. I just need to breathe and I need to observe my breath. And from there, I think I've kind of been following that channel, that kind of river upstream, to kind of be noticing where else I can find that. And I think I find that in the modern human natural world, out in forests, out by the sea, and just sort of taking steps to notice that those places are sacred, and they're worth protecting. Um, so I've been really, exploring for myself like what spiritualism means, but with a very small s, about being alive around other beings other than human, and really just sort of feeling awe and wonder at those things. So I think that it sort of moved into that space now.
Yeah. It reminds me of the journey back to the ancestors, which a lot of us are now experiencing, where we're really reaching back into nature, realizing we are nature, and realizing the sacred within every living thing, whether it's stone, plant, animal. And yeah, that holiness, that divinity within everything.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a process of remembering that, and I think from my understanding of what my ancestors needed to go through in order for me to be alive today, they had a dependency on the natural world, and they depended on it at a very, very immediate level. And I think that awareness of where the food comes from, where the water comes from, what the seasons mean for them in that present moment, I think it it gives it that feeling of like, yeah, how can I not be in awe of this? How can I not be find this just so much gratitude for it, because I'm alive because of it. And I think for me, it's been a process of re-exploring that in a more immediate way. And it's been really cool for me to start attempting to grow my own food and really learning about where natural springs are near me where I live, and just sort of being quite attentive to how I feed myself and how I like um how I resource myself, because that is in a way like um coming back to life for me in the way that my ancestors did.
Yeah. One of the things that I've started doing as well, my mum has a huge jar, like a massive one, with words of love and gratitude and peace and joy on them, and blessing her water, basically,
Mm.
like the Japanese guy, Masuro Emoto.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I used to have a water filter as well, but now I don't, and I bless my water, and it's amazing. It tastes like nectar,
Mm.
and it really is about bringing consciousness into all of our actions, like you say, when we're feeding ourselves, when we're, getting water, when we're living our daily lives, and those daily actions, bringing that consciousness into each and every moment. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, my partner, she also has the water with words. And it's amazing. It really also, I think drinking from that jar makes you just a little bit more conscious of the act of drinking it, and you really yeah, you just sort of really notice the sensations of it going into your body a bit more. I think that just that in itself is amazing, just to be able to know that it's, that water goes into your blood, that helps you oxygenate yourself, and it's like without it, you wouldn't be able to do all the fun things that you do. And I think it's just constantly being grateful for it. So it's nice because it's like a spiral that sends you up. I'm only really learning about that now. Really, it's just like being, doing good things for yourself and for the planet is a way of you know shaping a life that's uplifting.
Yeah.
So very very much at the early stages, but yeah, it's exciting.
So tell me more about your passion for climate resilience.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, just hearing those words all together is interesting for me because I think I'm exploring those terms, and I'm very much at the beginning stages of understanding really what climate means and what climate change means at a very like physical level, at practical level. And resilience as well. It's a term that I'm really beginning to understand. Um, so, you know, it's really about for me at this moment the emotional side of what all of this heaviness and change does to my body. And I have been aware of the work of Joanna Macy for some time. Maybe your listeners and will know a lot about how much of a legend she is. But for those that don't know, she is a 94-year-old American woman who's dedicated her life to um, what she calls coming back to life. So she started working in the sort of 50s and 60s with climate activists and noticing that a lot of these people were burnt out and really frustrated, just really, really sad, putting in all the hours and then getting nothing back and just seeing the next sort of sad thing on the news. And so she started to test out these workshops with people. And over the time, these have sort of built up into a really formalized framework that she calls the Work That Reconnects. And every framework, every sort of workshop that you run follows the same spiral, and it always starts with gratitude. And sometimes, often, if you're really down in the dumps, expressing gratitude for life is really, really hard. And often, when she was talking with these activists who were really at the forefront of the climate crisis, they were like, "How do you want me to be grateful? Like, how are you expecting me to be grateful?" And I think, you know, it's just the learning about like just the fact of being alive to face these issues is in a really odd way to say it is an extraordinary gift, just to be alive to face it. And I noticed that also for myself to say that does come from a place of immense privilege, but it is just, from that place of gratitude we can really move into the next part of the spiral, which she calls honoring our pain for the world. And the idea here is that if you can your express your concerns and your anxieties or your despair amongst other people, then what we're doing is depathologizing this. We're taking struggle out away from kind of the professional medicalized one-on-one therapy where you go and you pay someone to share your woes, but actually it's saying, well, no, what's it like to do that amongst peers? And once we share that grief and we honor it by just declaring it out in front of people, then it makes space to uh, go to the next part of the spiral, which is seeing anew with different eyes. And here we encounter activities to consider a different way of living life, to imagine a different future. And Joanna Macy has these great activities which, yeah, just help you in a playful way consider what's life like from a different perspective. And once you've kind of gone through that process of seeing life differently, the body, for whatever amazing reason, has this newfound energy. And I've done it a few times now, and I've been lucky enough to facilitate this process. And people do experience this uplift in energy. And the fourth part of the spiral, therefore, is going forth. So to help yourself make a declaration or setting an intention to go back to your friends and your family or your neighborhood to try something different, to attempt just a small step towards what you feel is a positive thing. So for me, this is climate resiliency. It's the attempt to come together with a group of people, a group of strangers, to express our concern and in community responding, however big or small, doesn't matter, but just responding. And I think what really helps is story. And you know, just thinking back, because I've needed a lot. I feel like I'm a reluctant storyteller or like a very cynical storyteller. And in the way that I just got really fed up of and just sort of like poo-pooed the idea that stories are actually significant for our species. And I've kind of been on a bit of a journey of just like, okay, yes, I'm cynical about that fact, but why don't I just use that cynicism as a kind of a way of navigating or like a question mark over like the direction that I take these projects. And um I think for me, I just noticed the feeling of when I've watched a really good film, like that feeling of like, oh yeah, that's life, or that can be life. And if you were to extrapolate that film on that one day, that one feeling into a lifetime, then stories can really shape a lifetime. So what what we're trying to do with the story gathering is take the work that reconnects and also share stories that can support um, groups and individuals into rethinking and re or inspire like in sparking different conversations with strangers so that it can drive towards taking little tiny steps towards a positive future. And that's what we're trying to do with the story gathering.
So you've become cynical about stories, you say?
I think I'm on the tail end of it. I think when I was at drama school, I think I was super excited by stories, and I think I was at a time at drama school when Brexit was happening, and then Donald Trump came into power, and it just felt like, growing up in a world which is just super depressing and super like felt like things were collapsing, um, which is a story in itself. But I was at drama school, and I think I was really lucky with the course I did. It was quite political, and it had a really strong stance that actors can be makers and have a position on things, and to make art that responds and can agitate for change. And I think I got really fed up of having conversations about how art can change the world. And I was just like, no, that's not going to change the world. What's going to change the world is direct action. And so that's why I went and explored human rights with Amnesty International. I just wanted to be done with anything related to theatre. I was so bored of it. Like, it's like how, not bored of it, but bored of the idea that it could actually influence positively. It just felt like it was in its own echo chamber, just speaking to the same thing over and over again. And yet, like, just to answer your question, there was still like an itch that wanted to be scratched for me about storytelling. And I think instead of just being frustrated by like how I think stories can't influence life, I'm just like, okay, well, I'm clearly curious about it. And I'm clearly like not convinced totally. So instead, I'm kind of exploring that thing and being like, okay, let's try and convince myself that it is actually useful. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that questioning is really important. And that questioning then opens up like different perceptions and different possibilities as well. Like the process that you were speaking about in the workshop that the participants are taken through, you kind of you get them in a grounding of gratitude, and then you get them to share into the space, what's kind of the challenges and their concerns. And then you take them through process to open up different perceptions and different possibilities. And I think when we get stuck on something, because I remember someone saying, you know, singing, for example, as a career is not really as impactful as a doctor saving lives. But then if you think of how many of us have been influenced by a particular song that has kind of carried us through those challenging moments and lifted us up when we've been down. And I think you could say the same for a lot of like stories and theatre and work like that as well. But I understand how you say it's quite confined at the same time, perhaps to certain groups of people.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it asks as well, like, what's the point of being alive as well? Like, you know, to be a human, once we've met our needs of like shelter and food and water, you know, some people argue that culture and like the sense of identity is also just as important or maybe more important than those things. But I don't, for me, I'm not convinced. But like, you know, that's the next thing. It's like, okay, we've met our needs. Who do we want to be? Like, how do we want to be perceived by other groups? How do I want to feel myself living this life? And I think culture and art and stories is our way of making sense of that. And it's a way of like offering back to the natural world beauty. You know, the natural world gives us so much unconditionally. You know, it offers us food, water every day. It doesn't ask for thanks, but in return, you know, we can offer it beauty and say like, you know, this is our attempt to echo what you're sharing with us. And in doing so, like we become more alive. Like we're able to, yeah, to organize ourselves in really beautiful ways.
Yeah. Meaning and purpose as well apparently do have a huge impact on our life and our well-being. When we have that sense of purpose and meaning, which story can bring in many ways.
Yeah, it's exciting. I just about that like story as a tool, and I'm really curious about this notion of stories being used to navigate. And I don't know much about it yet, but I read a really cool book called Songlines by Bruce Chatwin during lockdown, and it's my first like introduction to Indigenous Aboriginal communities and the way that they still use stories to cross thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of what may look like wasteland or you know just desert, but to them it's a map, and it's so much rich ecosystem and food and everything there. So you know they use song as a way to as a tool, as an actual utility to keep them alive. And I'm interested in that idea of like what stories do we create now as communities to help us navigate through what it is that we're going through now. And there's an amazing thought leader and writer, Manda Scott, who, together with other creators like Rupert Reed and from the Climate Majority Project, that have this notion of throutopias. So the idea that this is like a literary genre that we could harness to kind of support us to get through stuff. And you know, we know what dystopias are, but you know, they're very gripping to read and can be intoxicating. But nobody wants to live in a dystopia as much as more than we are already. Perhaps no one wants, you know, utopias are beautiful to read, but no one believes that we could ever live in them. But this idea of a through-topia, which is what Manda Scott talks about, is this sense that it's a story about a community moving through something together and harnessing all of the opportunities that they can to move through like struggle and then to get to the other side. And it's really about a state of transition and like how that plays out. And I think that's kind of cool. Like that's like a navigating tool in a way. And it's yeah, so what you're saying there about meaning and purpose being essential, you know, vital parts of just as much as food and water. It's the same for navigating and helping us learn where to get what we need to go, learning where to go, learning learning where to go. Full stop.
I love that. I love the Thrutopia idea because there's always going to be the kind of part of life's always going to be a bit of a dystopia, and part of it's going to be a bit of a utopia as well. And I think it's all part and parcel and mix. And so this idea of a Thrutopia where you can navigate through, you know, both of those worlds, because sometimes I'll have a blissful day and other days I'll have a not so blissful day.
Mm.
And so I think though, you know, the dystopia and the utopia are always present throughout our lives. And so, yeah, the Thrutopia sounds like a good way to go for sure.
Mm. Definitely.
So last year you visited Japan, was it last year?
That's right. Yeah, from
Yeah.
January, end of January to the mid-June last year.
Wow. And do you have a sauna story talking about stories from your journey in Japan?
Yeah. So Japan is an extraordinary place, and I met so many special people who are from Japan, and I think any trip is really made up of people, and um, yeah, and saunas. Any good trip is made up of good saunas as well. So yeah, I went to. They have a in Japan. They have onsen, and onsen is ONSEN, and it's a vital part of their culture. You know, people will go every day to the onsen, which is the huge, big thermal spas, and the men and the women are often separated, and you'll go and you'll sit and you'll clean yourself first, and then you'll go into these hot baths, and they often have different temperatures, and then sometimes they will have the sauna connected to them as well. And uh, I worked for the first 3 months of being in Japan. I worked in a bar called Half Note, which was sort of like a jazz and rock bar. And then in the mornings, I'd go and take myself out skiing with some friends and snowboarding, and then we'd go for an onsen afterwards, and then I'd go to work in the bar, and I'd pretty much do that 3 4 days a week. And so I was pretty obsessed with onsen. But when my trip in Hokkaido, my work finished, um, I went kind of exploring, backpacking, and hitchhiking, and I really wanted to go to a place called Miyazaki in the south of Japan. I'd heard really cool things about it, and you could surf there, and I like the idea of kind of skiing in Japan, also snow surfing in Japan. And anyways, um, I got to Miyazaki and I did my surfing session, and that was great. And I was also really obsessed with Shinrin Ryoku, which is like forest bathing. And I knew that near where I was staying in Miyazaki, there was an amazing forest bathing walk. And I thought, that's it, that's what I'll do. So I woke up and I kind of got myself on a train and I took myself out of town and um, arrived quite late in the day, and I started walking towards the forest bathing walk. And I kept walking. I was like, it's actually pretty far to go. But I was like, I'm here now. I've made all this effort. I'm going to keep going. And anyway, I took a left turn and found myself at this like really random like lodge in the middle of the forest. And I got a bit closer. And it was just about 30 guys, all with their motorbikes. And I kind of approached them and I was like, Shinrin Yoku, like forest bathing. And one of them picked up what I was trying to say. And they all sort of laughed and thought like, nah, this is not the place. But one of them took me to their sort of forestry commission office, about a 10-minute walk from there. And I spoke to them and they were like, yeah, it's here, but it's very far. Like you're gonna have to go very far. And I was like, right, okay. So anyway, I said my thank yous and kept walking and thought, do you know what? I'm just gonna try. And I kept walking. And I just sort of said, the next car that comes, I'm gonna wave them down and see if we could figure something out. And so that's what happened. A very small work like a laborer's Mitsubishi, it's like a very tiny little Jeep pulled up, and I waved them down, and luckily the guy stopped, and and I sort of explained where I wanted to go, showed him my phone, the picture, and then he was like, "Oh, it's very far," and then. But he was like, okay, get in. So he drove me up and we were talking and chatting and I started joking about onsen. And he was like, oh, you like onsen? I was like, I love onsen. Yeah, it's great. And we sort of had a sort of very, very broken English chat about that. And we got to the eventually got to the start of the walk. And I was getting my stuff on. And then I noticed that he was getting his boots on and his bag. ready. And I was like, what's going on? He was like, I'm coming walking with you. And I was like, what? Oh, okay, great. Let's do it. So we started walking, and it was a long walk. It was up a really beautiful river ravine. And he was local. He grew up in that valley. He was born in that valley. And he was sort of sharing some of his story as we walked up. And we got to the top eventually. It was this beautiful waterfall, and I went swimming, and we had some food, and then we were like, right, it's time to go. So we walked back down. We got in the car, and he turned to me and he was like, onsen? And I was like, no way. Yeah, like absolutely, onsen, let's do it. And so we drove up the mountain for like a good 15 minutes, and we got to this huge hotel. And I was like, no, we're going in here. Wow. So we walked to the foyer, and we were like pretty muddy and sweaty from the walk, and very posh, like foyer, you know how hotels are. And we walked straight up, and he tries to buy me the onsen, and I said, absolutely not. So I bought us the onsen. And yeah, so we get changed and head in to this very steaming, beautiful like onsen. And yeah, I just got into the hot water, and we kind of didn't, you don't really speak much in onsens, really. It's kind of the kind of culture there is that everyone's in their own space, just enjoying their own company. And um but it was, to this day, I think, one of the most extraordinary views I've ever seen. Like the hotel onsen looked out over this valley where I'd been walking that day. And it also did have a sauna attached to it, which I appreciate is not, yeah, it was, I did go into the sauna, but I really wanted to be in the hot water and to look at this view. Um, and yeah, it was just a beautiful day, and so much spontaneity and kindness shown by this guy. Um, and he later dropped me off at the station, and yeah, he waved me off, and it was dark by that point. And just, I've not spoken to him since. I've never but just so much generosity and goodwill, and I will never forget that sauna trip.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I'm smiling so much because I lived in Japan for 3 years. I don't know if
Oh
you,
wow. No, I didn't know that.
and
Cool.
their kindness and generosity, they'll be going in the other direction and they'll take you, they'll turn around and go, and
Yeah.
it's just, it's so beautiful. And what a lovely memory that you had, and for him to join you on the walk as well. How beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So beautiful. Yeah. Whereabouts in Japan were you? Were you everywhere or one
I
place?
was in Kyushu, so the southern of the main four islands, and
Yeah.
I was there for 3 years teaching English through the Japanese embassy. And I love onsens.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So when you really surrendered, didn't you, on that trip? I really get a sense that you surrendered to the synchronicities, to the journey.
I suppose I did. Yeah, I suppose I did. I think I have a slight kind of dogged kind of determination-y kind of thing as well, where I'm like, I've kind of said I've come out this far, and I'd like to try and get it. But there's, yeah, I within that is this, yeah, just accepting something. I don't know, I haven't put my finger on it, but yeah, accepting something and just really like letting go and seeing where things go. I think I really find my flow state in
How
that.
wonderful.
Yeah.
In your life, what would you say has been, obviously you had the Vipassana meditation retreat. Are there any moments, other moments in your life that were pivotal for your own self-mastery, for your own journey that you're on?
Such a beautiful question. I think the Vipassana one is pretty significant to me. I think it's always been a really helpful tool when I'm kind of in my own head. I've done 4 Vipassana 10-day sits, and each one goes a little deeper into myself. Um, and it's really helped me to know that I have my baseline, my kind of um like my good health and my feeling of joy that I can experience, that is the baseline. That's my body in default. And everything else is like a story and a kind of me getting caught up in my own crap, and sometimes other people's crap, but it's all of even their crap is stuff that I've generated myself. Um, so that's a really significant thing for me. And I'm not saying I get it right all the time, but it's just like, no, come back to breath, come back to how do I feel right now, and just observe that. And it's really helped me mature, I think, or helping me mature. Um, what else? Yeah, I think I spent some time at a really amazing place called Embercombe last year, and they've got a program there called The Journey, and it's ran by some really special people called Tuba, Joe, and a guy called Mac, and they have this 6 day project where you go over about between 15 and 24 people through this process of re yeah, just sort of like yeah, each day is a day of art, like kind of asking like why are you alive? And like what does it mean to be alive? And spending a lot of time in nature just being with that question and just gently coaxing me into like, what am I waiting for? Like what are you waiting for something to happen in order for you to do something? And it was a really formative moment for me to kind of be like, okay, no, yeah, I don't need to wait for anything. It can happen now. And so yeah, I have like a huge amount of gratitude for that place because Embercombe is still to this day like really supporting me and from those experiences.
Is there something that stands out from the program?
I suppose it's the same for a few other programs that I've been in, which is the kind of element of listening to other people's stories and um like other places like Embercombe, there's time spent in sort of talking with others in community, and you kind of have a moment to share your moment, your what's going on for you, and then you listen to the next person. And um, so it's normally like a very short amount of time to speak. And I think a standout moment for me was no, making the connection between the amount of time that I had to speak, which was very short, and to sort of share all I wanted to share in that moment. I was every day I was really finding more feelings and more words that I had to get out. But when the bell went, I had to stop. I was invited to stop, and the next person would speak. And it was the moment I kind of made the connection between the fact that I've got those few minutes to speak, and then the rest of my life is the same. I was born 28 years ago, and I'll probably die between, God willing, however many years, but it's a short amount of time, right? And just noticing that within this short amount of time to live, I want to say things. And then from that, it's also how do I say those things? How do I live my life? And within the 3 minutes, at Embercombe, where I had to speak, 3 or 4 minutes, whatever, like um, how I articulated myself and how I was understood by other people was important to me. And I think I've taken that lesson and been like, well, how do I, with the short time that I have in this circle of life, like, what do I say? What do I do? And how do I do it? And that's been a really useful like lesson for me, just to kind of compare those two or kind of have those two models to kind of consider.
Yeah. So, who is James if you had to explain James in 3 words?
James in 3 words.
No pressure.
That's a great question. I'm just thinking about that. Um, I'd probably go thoughtful by the sound of it. Definitely, James is thoughtful, filled with thoughts, curious, and something around like trying. I think I like to try my best as much as I can. So, in 3 words, thoughtful, trying, curious.
Mm. And you can change those anytime. One thing I think is important is that we realize that we can change our mind whenever we like. And yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing to remember. We often have conversations with people who are like, "You changed your mind," and it's like, "Well, yes, we're constantly changing." But the curiosity, I can definitely see that in you. and the thoughtfulness, there's almost an explorer there as well, an insightful explorer.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for echoing that back, Juliette. It's really feel very affirmed by that. Thank you.
Mm. What are you putting out there into the world then with your hopes and dreams as we move closer to 2025?
Mm. So I'm putting out my hopes and dreams into 2025. I really want to know what it's like to live in a place where I know people and I'm living in community with those people, and that we're not in general terms, not everybody, but like a feeling that we're all contributing towards something. Um, I live in Bristol in Easton, and I think that's rich, fertile ground to try that. And I really want to just feel more connected to the people around me. Um, so that's one thing, definitely. The story gathering, I'd love to be in a place where it sort of runs itself in a way. I'm excited by the prospect of like kind of creating, having a kind of an idea and a vision of what story gatherings can be, and then in a way like having the courage to sort of let go of it and like see what a group of people can do with it. Um, and I think I'm just noticing like the kind of founder energy of being like attached to it and wanting to have like a signature on it. And I think I want to learn to kind of quickly let go of that as quickly as I can. Um, my hopes and wishes are just to be, yeah, super creative, and I really want to. One thing that came up for me at Empacombe was I've always really enjoyed singing and making music, and I'm learning just to like just do that for the sake of it. Like I don't have to be good at it, but I want more singing and more art and dancing, with friends and people and family. Um, yeah, I'll pause there. Some good wishes there.
Yeah, thank you. And is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with as a tool, as an advice, as a gem for them on their own journey of self-mastery?
Well, first of all, hello. Nice to meet you. I think in terms of like advice, I think not sure about advice, but what I'm really trying to try myself is like really focusing on good quality sleep, really, really appreciating how important that is for me. Um, and yeah, how the importance of being connected with friends and family, and just an old, like really old friends as well. Like, also it's important to let people go who don't, letting things go is cool, but just really having roots to people and places is really important. So how could you feel more connected to the landscape around you and the people around you? Um, and also just noticing your visions and your dreams and your ideas and really paying close attention to them and really just being with them and writing them down and painting them and dancing them, singing them, and just know that they're a gift for the world, and that whatever you're dreaming is a gift, and that you can make gentle steps, little steps to kind of bring them to life. So that would be what I would say about that.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I can really feel that. And I think it can be that sometimes we focus on what we need to improve and achieve, improve and better. But actually, what a gift to focus on your dreams and your visions and bring them into life. And I heard, 80% focus on those, and 20%, yes, we can look at what we need to improve, but really paying the majority of attention to those things, those wonderful visions that we want to bring to life.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, James, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this chat, Juliette. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm a really old friend because I'm 50 years old now.
It's great.
I know you didn't mean it that way, but
A new maturing friend.
yeah.
How wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, Juliette.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Soulful Sauna podcast. We appreciate your continued support. Feel free to leave us a rating, share with your family, friends, and loved ones. I have a question to leave you with. What inspired you from today's podcast, and what actions are you going to take as a result? Time to tell your own story of self-mastery.